Okay. As you notice, attack and sustain. That's simple. This on and off button is exactly that. It's an on and off button, bypass, etc. And if you're wondering about that link, it's kind of a weird thing. Sometimes those buttons mean that as you increase the attack, it has an inverse motion on the sustain knob and vice versa. That's not the case here. Really, all the link thing is saying is it lets you know when stereo operation is active. So it lights up in a stereo in or out situation or in a mono to stereo configuration. But when it's in a mono in and a mono out, you'll notice the link is not on. If you had to know, not that important. Lastly, you just have an output gain because obviously, as we've talked about before, when you're adding attack, sometimes your gain goes through the roof. You need to bring it down a little bit. Or if you're rolling off attack, for instance, your sound gets a little quieter, gets a little buried. You can use the output gain as sort of a makeup gain, which helps you keep the sample or the sound source, whichever, right where you want it. Okay, so the second example I want to make with this plugin is really just a clever way of working with drum rolls. Okay, so for instance, as you can see down here in the MIDI, I've created this very, very typical, very standard, very cliche drum roll. Do not judge me on creativity points for this. It's just something that you would see, in any number of genres. So let's just have a listen to what it's doing. Right? So there's a number of things that you could do here. Obviously, velocity editing would be one thing that I would look at. I would definitely look at sending it to some sort of tight reverb, maybe a slapback reverb just to kind of fill in the air, and then maybe even a secondary reverb that is automated to open up as these 32nd and 64th notes start to roll, so you get this wide air coming out of it. Great. All that's well and good. But here's one thing that'll happen. You'll notice that as we get into these 32nd notes and these 64th notes, they start to smear together, almost creating just like a tone, right? So what we're going to do here with the Transient Designer, and this is just a really cool cleanup trick to get a little bit more articulation and detail out of, for instance, a drum fill or a drum riser or a drum roll, is we're going to put on the SPL Designer, and I'm going to, again, activate the LFO tool here so you can see the waveform as it develops. I'm going to hit A for automation. And now what you can see here is I've automated the sustain knob from the SPL to start at a full open sustain and then gradually tighten as the line goes on. So what'll happen here is, let me see if I can get this screen real estate working for us here. So what'll happen here is the sustain is just going to gradually tighten as the busyness of the rhythm increases. So you'll notice on the quarter notes, it's at full blast. And then by the time we're here at these 64th notes, it's completely shut off. So again, imagine using an automation of like a reverb to get big stereo space going into the 64th notes. If those attacks are all overlapping and sounding really sort of sloppy, the reverb is going to reflect that slop, and you're going to end up with this. Yeah, the reverb's going to get big, but it's going to start to sound really messy, and you're going to be in this kind of weird juggling act of how much reverb to send and trying to get into like some gain automations and stuff like that just to make it sound a little bit clearer so you can make out the actual rhythm of the drum roll line in terms of its rhythmic subdivisions. This is a really cool way to trim all that fat before it goes into something like your further processing. So let's just have a look and listen to what's going to happen here. Now keep your eye over here on the sustain knob and also look at how that automation curve is controlling the sustain knob. right? So you don't even need gain. You don't even need any sort of cleanup plugins to try to make sure that the 64th notes don't come screaming out at you super loud or whatever. Basically, what's happening is it's just trimming the length of each stroke as the subdivisions of the line move forward. So again, when we're in the quarter notes, we have full blast on the sustain. When we move into the eighth notes, we're going to tighten those tails a little bit. And then as we move into the 32nd notes, that just eliminates so many problems all the way up front. You're not trying to adjust levels with volume automation. You're not bringing up new plugins to try to calm or curve the intensity of that rhythmic subdivision. Like you're not using a ton of different things to try to get this to just sit right and work right. You're not going into gating to try to get the tails of things to be a little bit tighter, moving into the much tighter subdivisions. We're just doing it right here in Transient Designer. And if we do it right, I think, let's see, this is an 8-bar. We can look at the whole entire thing, and you can see the benefit of just using a Transient Designer and automating its sustain on a snare roll to get a great deal of clarity in the line itself, dry and upfront. So when you do go to use something like distortion or reverbs or any number of things, say you like chorus on your drum rolls, many people do, all of those additional color plugins will now play so much nicer that you've done this very simple automation cleanup with a Transient Designer. Okay, so let's listen to it one more time and have it play us out. Sick. All right. I'm Chris Herrera. Catch you guys in the next video.